This is my Grizzly G0453 planer I bought from Grizzly. I wanted to tell you about a little bit about the planer, tell you some problems I had with it, what I think of it, and later in other videos, shortly I'll be doing the review on the G0690 Grizzly table saw. And way over here in my messy shop is the G1026 shaper. I have used all of these pieces of equipment. I've set them all up and they all operate fine. Before I had Delta equipment and it was industrial equipment, so I'm basing my reviews off of basically comparing the old equipment I have to the newer equipment. And everybody knows that the older Delta equipment was made in the United States, and their unisaw that I had and shaper and different things. Actually I had a jet shaper, but that wasn't made in the United States, but they held up pretty good. I have other jet equipment. I have a 6-inch joiner, a jet, 14-inch bandsaw with a riser block, and it's done me well over the years. But anyway, let's get back to the planer. Okay, the planer, so far, after setup and operation, the planer works superbly. I get no tear out, I get no end snipe. I use some other reviews, which later I'll post some links to some setup review videos that I used that I had a little bit of snipe and I couldn't figure it out, and I went on YouTube and looked it up, and someone else, and I can't remember who it was, so I'll have to look it up, had a video on there and some articles online that helped me, and it did get rid of my end snipe. The problem I have with the planer, one is if you order this equipment from Grizzly, go over it carefully. When you get it in, make sure that you go over every single piece of that equipment before you fire it up, get it running, and ruin it. Because quality control coming out of China, or wherever, I guess it's China where they're made, it's good. For Grizzly, I'd say it's good. It's as good as Jet or anything that I've purchased before, but you just want to double check. You spend a lot of money for this equipment, you don't want to ruin it before you start it. And this perfect example was in the owner's manual, was make sure there's oil in the gearbox. Well, you would think that this thing shipped with oil in the gearbox, and it probably did. But when I got it and I checked it before I operated it, there was zero oil in the gearbox. So I would have ruined it if I'd have started it. My case is I'm suspecting that they did fill the gearbox with oil, but that right here is inside this shaft right here is an O-ring. There's an O-ring seated in this housing right here, which I just got done repairing. I should have did a video on it, but I wanted to get it done so I can use it. And I didn't have my phone out here at the time, so this is I'm almost 90% complete with this, and I was going to put it back together, and I thought, well, I better shoot a video real quick to help other people in case they have the same problem. So in my case, the oil, which you can probably see is oil marks under here, was running down the side and onto my floor in my shop. So I knew that it was coming from this seal and not the gasket that's over here, because I would wipe it off and the oil trail would lead from under here back under and then drip off and come down. This is not an easy repair. What I got to say is Grizzly was superb. I called them. They said, no problem, send the parts out to you. If you got any questions and you need help, call us. We'll walk you through the procedure. Great customer service. So far, everything I've purchased from them, if there was a problem with it, it was rectified by Grizzly. So I give them thumbs up, kudos to them. The parts I got them in, they sent me a new gasket for this housing right here that's on the side. They sent me a new O-ring for here. I didn't need to use the new gasket because the old gasket was salvageable. I mean, there was no damage to it, so I figured why put a new one on if the other one was working, so I didn't use it. What I will tell you is this repair is not for someone that's not mechanically inclined. Because if you've ever taken a car motor apart and worked with timing chains, that's sort of about the same thing you're doing here. And it's a two-person job. You can do it alone, I did it, took it apart, put it back together, and when I got it back together, the gearbox didn't shift. So it was an issue. My wife just happened to come out to the shop, and I used her as a second pair of hands, and it went a lot faster. So you can do it by yourself, but I don't recommend it. What you're going to do is, there's the gearbox that's here. You're going to take this cover off, which is right there. You'll have to take one of these corners off. Just take one of the screws out. I think it was this one. I just took this screw out here on the back side, and you flip this out of the way, and you can finagle that cover and get it off. This is the center Allen head screw that comes out of the back side, which is on this side of the cover, on the shifting side of the cover. It goes right there. Make sure you take the Allen screw out, take one of those screws out, flip that out of the way, and you can work it out. The two Allen wrenches that you'll need for this is, sorry, it's on an iPhone. You'll need a 6mm, and I'll go into something else that I found out about this a little further down, but you will need a 6mm Allen wrench, and you're going to need a 5mm Allen wrench, a 10mm boxed end wrench, and a 14mm boxed end wrench, and some long screwdrivers for prying. And when I mean prying, I mean gently prying. But anyway, you take the cover off that's here that covers this. Then what you want to do is take this bolt loose. This is the 14mm. You take this out. It has a washer that goes on the outside, and there's a keyway in each one of these gears, so you don't want to lose the keyways. These are 10mm, these two, and all these gears have to come off at the same time. You can't take one gear off without prying and bending something, the chain. I don't even think you'll get it off, but if you were to try and, you know, get gorilla crazy with it, you probably could, but you're just going to ruin it. So all three of these gears, you just bring them out a little bit at a time until you can get one of the bottom one will come off first. This one you can play and get off, and once you get that off, that chain will pop off, and then these two should come off simultaneously together. You know, you bring them out as a group. This is a spring tensioner. It holds tension on the chain right here, and there's a spring under here. You can take that off and relieve the tension on this and flip this back out of the way. It will get in your way when you do this repair. You just have to work with it. You know, you just keep it out of the way while you're working, and you'll be fine. All right, so once you get the gears off that are out here, that leaves you with the gearbox. Okay, the gearbox has 5mm hex head screws, and I'll show them to you if you can see them. There's some buried behind here, so I can't show you all of them, but there's one here, one here, one here, one here. I believe there's one up here and one on this corner. I don't think there's one in this corner at all. Trying to look behind it. No, I don't see one over there. I think the one right here is probably the only one. But anyway, you take all those out. When you get those out and all this is open, you take this black plastic knob off, the shift knob, and get it out of your way. You don't have to, but it's plastic. If you drop it, it's going to break, or it's better to just take it off. So then what you're going to do is you're going to gently pry on this and tap with a wooden block or a little rubber hammer. And you're going to start to pull this whole assembly out, this whole cover out. This cover will not come off and pop off to where you can see the gearbox. That's not how it works. This is where it gets complicated. Behind here, and you can see this little recess, that's the bearing housing recess for the gear that's there. There's another one. There's another one in there too that has it's right below here. It's in this vicinity right here. So there's a gear here, and your main shift gear is right here. And the handle pushes the inside. There's a fork in there, just like a tranny almost, or a clutch type deal. And there's a fork on the back side here. It's actually like this. And it pushes the gear, the main gears, in and out to shift from high to low speed. But all these are synchronized between all three. So they're all touching each other, and they all have to come out at the same time. So when you pull the cover off, and well, I forgot to, you got to drain the oil out of it naturally. I mean, the drain plug is under here, which, since I'm on the topic, I'll tell you. There's a drain plug there. The fill plug is back up under here. God knows why they put it there, but it's very hard to get to. Now, I don't take credit for this, but Grizzly tech support gave me some information, helped me out a lot. This screw right here, and that's a 6mm. If you back this screw out, that screw goes directly through the gearbox housing to support it and hold it up to the top. Either one of these actually, but you know, I prefer this one because this one was more open than this one when I looked inside, so I chose this one. Not to be your lubrication point, but it's this screw right here. You take that screw out, you can fill your oil box from there. You don't have to mess with that goofy fill plug that's way tucked up underneath the side that I showed you. So this makes filling it just absolutely easy, and I thank Grizzly for that. So anyway, back to the gearbox. So what you're going to do is, there's 3 gears in the back of here. This will have a double gear on it with a fork that attaches to this shift knob. And then you're going to have, you know, like 2 pinions that are up here, and they're all interlocked because there's a gear on there's a bearing on the front of these 2. There's bearings on the back that sit into the back housing, and the whole thing comes out together, and it's not easy to do. So what you're going to do is, after you drain the oil and everything, you're going to gently start tapping with this with a rubber hammer and trying to pull and pry a little bit. I used a screwdriver actually right up in here and just wiggled a little bit. You don't want to put a lot of force on this because, you know, it's not a prying point, and but it is something you can do. And then on this corner, I was lucky enough, this corner sticks out a little bit, so I was able to get a little bit of meat on there. I just used a real long screwdriver and just kept wiggling a little bit, and I was able to pop this loose. Once you start to get it loose, it comes off pretty fast. But you'll take this out, and then these 2 gears, you're going to have to reach behind this cover because these gears are like pressed into the housing. They're not such a tight fit that you need a puller or anything to get them out. You can get them out with your hands. So what you do is you reach behind there, and you gently with your fingers start to wiggle these gears and start to pull them out. And then when the bearing on the back side housing, which is the same as this right here, pops out, then the bearing will, you know, that whole gear assembly will come loose. Then there's another one right here, but you want to be careful. You don't want to, you know, you don't want to be banging them together and chipping the gears and all that. So that's why I said it's to have 2 people, it's easier. Somebody needs to hold this cover out so that it's leaning top end out, and then you can get your hands behind it. And once you pop those out, all this will come out as an assembly. When you take it out as an assembly, the 2 gears that are in there will come out, and they're all together. You don't have to worry about anything falling out. And then in my case, this O-ring was bad in this housing right here. So what I ended up doing was I had to take this cover off, flip it over. Inside this housing is where the O-ring is embedded. It was hard to get out. I used a razor blade to pry it out, and an ice pick basically to keep working at it. It wasn't easy to get out. And I was able to pry the O-ring out, and then the new O-ring, you lubricate it with some oil first, put it back in, make sure that that groove in there is clean and there's nothing, you know, no debris or anything in there. In my case, there was nothing. The gearbox was nice and clean, looked like brand new. So I put the O-ring back in. I lubricated the back, and on the back side here, holding the fork on to get this bar out of here, there's a 10mm hex head screw. That 10mm hex head screw that holds the fork onto this bar needs to be removed. You can pull this bar out to get to that O-ring. Then once you're done, you get the O-ring in, you lubricate it up, and then you lubricate this shaft, and you gently work the shaft in there onto the O-ring. Put it in, put your 10mm bolt on it. Now on that 10mm bolt, what I will tell you is on the back side of that, it sits really close to this large shifting gear. I mean, phew, so close that it almost touches the gear when you're backing the bolt out. If that bolt were to come loose, you're probably going to end up having problems. So when I took it out, there was blue Loctite on it. I put blue Loctite on it when I put it back together. So I would definitely make sure there's some Loctite on there. Everything else is reverse. To go back into this, to go back together, what you're going to do is you're going to hold that up. You're going to put the gears in as one assembly in, and it's not easy. You're going to press these two gears in right here, wiggle them in until you get the bearings set in the rear housing, and that they stay in nice, and they line up real nice. And then you work this housing in, and there's two alignment pins right about here that hold the gasket on, and they hold, you know, they serve to line up the outer casing with the inner casing. And then what you're going to do is you're going to start to just wiggle this on, and in my case, I used a little piece of wooden block, and I just tapped, or, you know, around here, and just kept fitting it in, because you don't want these gears to not mesh together. You don't want to be smashing them with a hammer or anything, or you're, you know, just ruining it. So, like I said, gently get it on there. It wasn't easy to do. Then when you get it tight, check your gasket all the way around. Make sure that the gasket's seated. You can see the gasket, you know, edges right against the edge of this housing. And then you put all of your Allen head screws back in, and you start to tighten that up. You can actually use those if you're having a problem to line it up. You can actually put two of these in, these two center ones, or more if you like, but I just chose the two center ones. And what I did was I just put them finger tight in there, took the Allen wrench, and then just put a little bit of pressure on that one, a little bit of pressure, tap, 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 all the way around, and it would work its way in. And then finally, what you want to do is you don't want to shift this when the planer's not running. So the easiest thing to do is the second person again, as I had my wife turn the belt on the planer while I checked the gearbox once I got the cover on and these screws in. If you do what I did the first time, you're going to fill this whole thing up with oil, you're going to put all this back on, and then the darn thing wouldn't shift. So I don't know why it wouldn't shift. Maybe I just didn't pull hard enough, but I didn't want to ruin anything, so I took the whole thing back apart again, checked everything, put it back together, and it freed right up. So I think in my case what it was that assembly with the fork is meant to slide the gears back and forth like this. And when I put it back together, somehow this got jammed just a little bit from tapping on it. So it sort of got locked in one spot, and I didn't want to force it. If I'd have probably tapped this or pulled on it a little bit harder, it might have freed itself up. But taking it back apart, I had to drain the oil, do the whole thing over again. That's why I'm showing it to you now. Then you're pretty much going to put this together like this. You know, safety, you always want to make sure when you're running, your equipment's unplugged before you do this naturally. This is common sense things. And you want to make sure that when you get it back together at this stage right here, go ahead and run it and shift it and make sure it shifts. And you can run it for a couple seconds without oil in it. I wouldn't recommend, I mean, it's probably not it's against practice probably, but as long as this was all lubed up inside and oil everywhere, I wouldn't have a problem like I did running it for 10 seconds to make sure that the shift knob works before you fill it back full of oil, because it takes a lot of time to drain this and do, you know, the thing that you need to do to get to the steps. And for me, it was extra work. So it's back together. It runs good. It shifts good. I have no oil leakage out of the new O-ring that I put in here. It's a lot of work for one little O-ring in this housing right here. But, you know, maybe this will help you out. If you have any questions or you're in this repair and you need help, you can, you know, get in touch with me through the video, and I'll try to help you and walk you through it as best I can. Like I said, I'll be doing another review on the table saw, which is the G0690, and I'll be doing the review on the shaper, the G1026 shaper in the future here. But I have to get things cleaned up and organized, and I just haven't gotten to that stage. So I hope this helped you. Any questions, let me know. I'll post some other links on there later. It won't be right now because I want to get the video out in case somebody has an issue with working with this. But if you get a hold of me through the video, I can send you the links and help you out in any way. So I hope this helps. Take care and have fun woodworking.